Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are kicking off Lore and Chill Week with Dark Souls 3 Lore of the Main Bosses by the man himself, VaatiVidya. We've been doing these ever since we finished Bloodborne. We did it for Dark Souls 1, 2, and now 3. I always end up loving these games even more after watching his videos. He does an amazing job at putting all of the pieces together. Everything that is given to us in the world, he interprets it and gives us a beautiful cinematic experience for us to enjoy. We are going to be covering the lore of the main bosses, the optional bosses, the Prepare to Cry series. I believe he's got some on the DLC as well, which I would love to dive into. And yeah, whether you have seen all these already or this is your first time, I hope you enjoy this. Let's kick back, relax, grab yourself a drink, a snack, whatever it is. And before we get started, guys, I'd like to announce that we are going to be playing Sekiro next here on the channel. It'll be starting either next week or the following week. I hope you guys are as excited as I am. It's going to be amazing to jump into kind of a different type of game while still having that amazing FromSoft formula. So without further ado, guys, thank you so much for being here, and let's begin Lore and Chill Week with the lore of the main bosses. Right off the bat, I'm seeing that this video has 11 million views, which is unreal, and a ton of chapters as well. Oh, these are the sources. Okay, that's amazing. Like I said, VaatiVidya collects all these tidbits from the item descriptions and just kind of pieces it all together for us, which is incredible. But anyways, let's get into it, man.
The stories of Souls games have always revolved around bosses, but that statement has never been more true than for Dark Souls 3. If you understand who you're killing in this game, then you will understand the story.
Nice.
The first one in your way is Udex Gundyr, the Ashen Judge and scabbard to the coiled
Great
sword
first
of
boss,
the shrine.
I gotta say.
This sword is bequeathed only to chosen Ash, who can best him in battle. But before he was the Ashen Judge, Gundyr walked through this place much like we did, on his way to meet his firekeeper and link the fire.
Oh, cool.
Charged with a duty and granted a cast iron halberd that would never crumble, Gundyr arrived, late, greeted by a shrine without fire and a bell that would not toll.
Oh, crap.
The flame had already faded, and his firekeeper had been thrown into the depths of the bell tower, grave of firekeepers past. She never met her champion, and the ensuing tragic farce became a favorite tale of the masses. And after he was bested by an unknown warrior, which is probably us, Gundyr the champion became sheathed to a coiled sword in the hopes that someday the first flame would be linked once more. Perhaps Gundyr, with his unbreakable halberd, was fated to eternal service from the beginning.
Wow.
Since it's implied that Gundyr expected to meet a firekeeper, he was likely meant as a candidate for linking the fire.
Damn, nice.
Those capable of linking the fire are named Lords of Cinder, beings capable of bringing back the world from the brink of darkness by linking the first flame.
Right.
Indeed, the game speaks of 3 Lords of Cinder who have already linked the fire, and they're being resurrected as a last resort to link it once again. In the opening cutscene, you saw them. Aldrich, Saint of the Deep, Yhorm the Giant, and Farron's Abyss Watchers.
It's actually crazy seeing the cinematic now that we fought like all of these bosses, and I gotta say this cinematic is probably one of my favorites out of all of the games, although the Dark Souls 1 cinematic is just incredible. Like seeing Gwyn take down the dragons and everything else that was in it was just chef's kiss. I also love the Elden Ring one. The way that they just did like the paintings. I remember saying that, and it was my first Souls game, so I wasn't even expecting a cutscene or anything before the game. Like that beautiful, and that work of art was just so incredibly good, man. Let me know which cinematic is your favorite. I'm actually very curious.
Each of these lords once had an age of their own, and the remnants of their age lives on in Dark Souls 3 and in their resurrection. For example, Aldrich is linked to these bosses and their stories. The Abyss Watchers are linked here, and those in Lothric are conjoined here. For simplicity's sake, we're going to discuss these stories in 3 chunks, starting with Aldrich, Pontiff Sulyvahn, Vort, and the Dancer, who all reside in the Boreal Valley.
Such a good roster.
The Boreal Valley is currently ruled over by Pontiff Sulyvahn, a tyrant who sends his outrider knights to serve as his watchful eyes and his guards. And the first knight of Pontiff Sulyvahn we meet is Vort, an outrider knight who ambushes us as we attempt to leave Lothric.
Man, Vort was such an amazing like second boss. I still count it as an introductory boss, but he was just so perfect, like to set the tone for the entire game. Not only his music, which I didn't mention it the first time we fought him, but I've seen so many memes using Vort's OST like music, which is so incredibly funny. But that still didn't diminish any of his badassness. Badassness? I don't know. Like from the music and his moves, like it really, really set the tone for what Dark Souls 3 bosses were going to be like, which are some of the best in the entire franchise. Like, let's be real here, but let's continue.
So the Outrider Knight's job is to keep an eye on things. Sullivan's knights are also described as his watchful eyes and his punitive blades. Each Outrider Knight is provided with a ring by the Pontiff, which transforms them into frenzied beasts and lures them into battles of death.
Damn.
Specifically, the two main Outrider Knights we see upon the high wall of Lothric appear at both points of progression in the area, so perhaps they serve as strategically placed guards in order to hinder our progression, and for Sulyvahn to keep an eye on the world. When you went through Irithyll, I'm sure you noticed those ghosts that seem to be walking the streets. Well, they likely represent the Outrider Knights before their departure and descent into madness, because two in particular are very interesting. They walk together, one man, one female, and the woman wears the mask of the dancer.
Oh shit!
Vort was never far from the fleeting dancer, who watches over Emma in Lothric's Grand Cathedral. The dancer is far more intriguing than Vort is. The Pontiff ordered her to serve as a dancer, and then he ordered her to serve as his Outrider Knight.
So
he bestowed
cool, man.
enchanted swords upon her, one dark and one light, mirroring his own.
Yeah.
Eventually, the black eyes of the Pontiff transformed her into a beastly creature, her gauntlets fusing with her own hide. The fascinating thing about the dancer, though, is who she was before she became Sulyvahn's pet. It's a very popular theory that she is one of the 3 daughters of Guinevere who appear in-game. Here's the evidence. Her Aurora Veil is said to be an article of the Old Gods, which is permitted only for direct descendants of the old royal family.
Right.
The dancer's soul can also be transposed to give you the spell Soothing Sunlight, miracle of Guinevere of the old royalty.
Damn.
Guinevere used to reside in Anor Londo, home of the gods, and her line continues in Lothric. So Guinevere was also revered.
I'm sorry, I just love how VaatiVidya just like announces something and then he's like, here's the evidence. And then he just goes into this, which is like so clear that it's, you know, what he's saying. And I love this man.
As a goddess of fertility and bounty, she raised many heavenly children, and the dancer, having one of the 3 sunlight spells, is clearly one of them.
Right.
And of course, as you know, Pontiff Sulyvahn, the tyrant, now rules over Irithyll and Anor Londo, so it's my belief that Sulyvahn gained power within Anor Londo, then proclaimed himself Pontiff, and ordered Guinevere's daughter to serve as his dancer, and then Outrider Knight. The royal family was usurped and devoured and torn apart by Sulyvahn, who, Yorshka says, wrongfully proclaimed himself Pontiff. Even after the family's passing, the Silver Knights looked over their manor and the ruined cathedral. The story behind Pontiff Sulyvahn's rise to power is told lightly, with only clues peeking above the surface. But
what the hell? You know, I like the subtitles, man. Alright, whatever.
In a nutshell, I believe Pontiff Sulyvahn took over Anor Londo from within, probably with the help of the Deacons of the Deep.
Oh,
the only ones
hated
in
those
his
bastards,
way.
man. Also, I just noticed his sword was purple. I kept saying that it was blue, and a lot of you guys call me colorblind, which, you know, I'm starting to think I am. It's clearly not my monitor because I am seeing it purple now, but just wanted to address that. They are purple.
The Dark Moon Knights.
The Dark Moon Knights were once led by my elder brother, the Dark Sun Gwendolyn, but he was stricken by illness, and leadership of the Knights fell to me. Then Sulyvahn wrongfully proclaimed himself Pontiff, and took me prisoner. Oh, where could my dear brother be?
So when I say that Pontiff Sulyvahn took over Anor Londo from within, it is speculation on my part, but my reasoning is that he knew of Gwendolyn, and he knew of Yorshka, and he wrongfully proclaimed himself Pontiff, which all imply that he was a part of the system already. A pontiff is essentially a high priest, and the miracles, the weaponry, and the rings of the Dark Moon all rely on faith. Additionally, there's a bit more evidence that the pontiff was a part of the Dark Moon system already. The sword in his left hand is a ceremonial sword representing the judgment of the moon. However, its magic is far closer to sorcery than any existing lunar power. Its dark blue hues, deeper than the darkest moon, reflect.
You just said dark blue. Is it blue or is it purple? Guys, help me out here.
Sorcerer Sulyvahn's true nature. Yoshka calls Sulyvahn a tyrant, which can mean someone who elects themselves ruler without legal right. This, along with his great sword of judgment that references the moon, furthers that idea that he took over from within, the figurehead of a movement that was abandoning their faith in favor of Sulyvahn's true calling, dark sorceries. And the same sort of shift was happening amongst the Deacons of the Deep, who we find all throughout Anor Londo. Originally, though, they were a group of clergymen dedicated to sealing away the potential horrors of the deep.
Whoa.
Deep protection tells us that the deep was originally a peaceful and sacred place, its deacons wearing dark red robes denoting their blessing of fire. Over time, however, the deep became the final rest for many abhorrent things.
I hated that thing
indeed,
so
human
much.
dregs were likely some of those things, as the dregs of humanity are said to sink to the lowest depths imaginable, forming the bedrock of the world. Those who linger too long on the brink of the deep will often slip, and lurking within the deep are insects which tear open the skin and burrow into flesh. Eventually, those dedicated to sealing away the horrors of the deep succumb to its very power. An example of this is their Tome of Knowledge, which was originally intended to teach divine protection, but it had dark tales.
I'm sorry, this boss just it's so cool, and now that we're understanding the lore, like it's kind of making it cooler, and you know, the music was cool, the setting, like the room was amazing with the dudes at the top and the chains coming from the ceiling. Amazing. It caught me so off guard, and I feel like that's not an uncommon thing amongst people that play these games for the first time. Like, you would never expect a absolute flock of people to just like you know try and kill you while they like walk super slowly. It was honestly a very cool but very goofy boss, if you ask me.
Added to its pages, making it a thing most profane. And along with this descent, presumably, was Aldrich, Saint of the Deep.
A right and proper cleric, only he developed a habit of devouring men. He ate so many that he bloated like a drowned pig.
Damn.
Then softened into sludge. So they stuck him in the Cathedral of the Deep. And they made him a lord of cinder, not for virtue, but for might.
Aldrich was this simple saint who became a hugely powerful being, eventually chosen, maybe willingly and maybe not, to become a lord of cinder and link the fire. The deacon's skirt tells us that the deacons tended to the flame, and I'm perhaps inclined to believe that this meant that maybe they were tending to the flame of Aldrich when he was a Lord of Cinder.
Right.
And whether this is true or not, we do know that the deacons eventually succumbed to the horrors of the deep, and neither tending to the flame nor the faith could save them.
Wow.
You would have noticed that many deacons cast Dark Soul sorceries, which were imparted to them by Archdeacon McDonnell, an adherent of Aldrich who was largely responsible for the corruption of the deacons. Archdeacon McDonnell delighted in the cathedral's stagnating souls. For him, they represented the glorious bedrock of this world. Under the guidance of Archdeacon McDonnell, these deacons became both clergymen and sorcerers.
McDonnell was the one that was in that like basement with like the water and stuff where the two beasts were. I don't think we never actually got to kill those two beasts. And you guys told me there was actually a really good item in that room. I just kind of left and never went back. But I think McDonnell was the dude that was kind of laying in the corner there. You could actually like join his covenant or something. I don't know. Maybe he'll cover it.
The Archdeacon's sin, as it's called, was to channel faith for sorcery, which transformed his staff from a symbol of religious authority into a catalyst of dark sorceries.
Cool.
The deacons, they still had faith, but it was not in fire any longer. It was in Aldrich, Saint of the Deep, their master. Upon his resurrection, Aldrich, like many Lords of Cinder, ruminated on the fading of the fire. For him, it inspired visions. He saw beyond the age of fire to the age of deep waters and the coming age of the deep sea. Filled with new purpose, he knew what he had to do. He would devour the gods himself.
That's so fucking cool, dude. Also, I just gotta mention it because I saw so many comments on the episode of Aldrich. And, I was very confused as to why he looked like Gwendolyn. But as most of you know, I'm sure all of you know, it's not actually it is Gwendolyn, but he's actually eating Gwendolyn. It's like he's controlling it, like almost like, like a puppet. Not even. It's just like kind of like he was like halfway through devouring it, and we just walked in kind of halfway, interrupted his meal. And I think that's really, really cool. And it made me wish that there was a cutscene for this boss. I remember walking in and like obviously being such an iconic arena in Anor Londo. I just wish that we got a cutscene. I wish that we could have seen like Aldrich just devouring Gwendolyn, like almost like starting it, and then looks back at us or something. But you know what? Maybe they're just trying to confuse us. Who knows, right? Like what the developers had intended or why they wouldn't put a cutscene. But I always thought that would have been a really cool cutscene to kind of add into the game. But anyways,
when we get to the Deacons of the Deep, we expect to find Aldrich in his coffin, but he's already left for his home in the Boreal Valley. The deacons here are led by Archdeacon Royce, who is one of the 3 archdeacons who remained behind to keep eternal watch over his master's coffin, hoping that one day he would return. Aldrich left behind a small doll in his coffin that Pontiff Sulyvahn gave to his most valued subjects.
Cool.
Wherever you go, the moon sets in Irithyll. Wherever you may be, Irithyll is your home. When Aldrich left, Archdeacon McDonnell went with him. We come across McDonnell in the depths of Anor Londo, and McDonnell, like many other deacons, is obese. He's huge, and I see that as a legacy of Aldrich, who derived power from gluttony. They're clearly mimicking him.
That's
in
awesome.
Anor Londo, Archdeacon McDonnell came to lead the Aldrich faithful, who are defenders, who exist to ensure that Aldrich, devourer of gods, remains undisturbed. And when we come across Aldrich, we realize why he wants to be undisturbed. Because Pontiff Sulyvahn, with a devourer of gods by his side, has imprisoned a god of the old royalty in the abandoned cathedral to be fed to the devourer. Gwendolyn, son of Gwyn and prior leader of the Darkmoon Knights, was gradually devoured by Aldrich. As Aldrich slowly devoured the god of the Darkmoon, he dreamt. In this dream, he saw the form of a young, pale girl in hiding. And we know this is Yorshka, who was sister to Gwendolyn, and a half-breed who is parallel to Priscilla from Dark Souls 1. But the interesting thing about this is the dream that Aldrich had, because apparently Aldrich only needs to dream about someone to learn their skills, for he uses Priscilla's life hunt scythe in battle. And this fact that he can learn things through his visions has some interesting implications, because Aldrich is clearly wielding a Gravelord greatsword upon the end of his spear, which lends credit towards this theory that Aldrich has devoured Nito in some capacity, and he is called the Devourer of Gods, plural, after all.
That's so cool!
So another question becomes, did Aldrich also devour Nito? Well, he has the wispy Nito-like cloak with skulls within it, but I think it's more likely that these skulls are just remnants of other humans that he's devoured.
Yeah, that could be it.
You have to remember there is no concrete evidence that he has devoured Nito, and I personally think it's more likely that he simply dreamt up the Gravelord spell in a similar manner to which he dreamt up the Life Hunt scythe from Yorshka. But what do you think?
Man, wouldn't it be cool if like From Software and like the writers would eventually like maybe like come out with like a book or something after like a few years of the games being released, just like confirming some of these theories and stuff, or like telling us exactly what they meant by like certain designs or item descriptions. Actually, I don't even know if like the fan base would want that. Maybe like we obviously like the whole mystery aspect of Souls games and the way that it's so cryptic and stuff, but I don't know. Maybe it would be cool to get some legitimate answers from the people that created this entire world. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think about that. But maybe it would be cool to just get some confirmation. Maybe they could just like watch VaatiVidya's videos and make like a FromSoft reacts to VaatiVidya and they just like confirm shit. I don't know. I'm just throwing shit out there.
I think shapes the story here, so let me know. So that's all of the Pontiff's lackeys explained for the most part, and the biggest unanswered questions here to go into in other videos is what exactly the relationship between Sulyvahn and the deacons is, and in what order this story of corruption and treachery played out, because timeline is always one of the hardest things to get right in the Soul series. But the biggest curiosity, in my opinion, and the one that really interests me, are Aldrich's visions of the age of the deep sea. From a being, remember, that has visions so accurate he can learn spells from those visions.
That's so crazy.
So, in a franchise that's entirely self-contained within this age of fire and its cycles, this vision of the deep sea, it's pretty much the only mention of a different future. And its appearance in these descriptions feels so out of place that I almost expect it to be referenced in the future in some capacity. Assuming it's not just a reference to Bloodborne, maybe this indicates what Miyazaki is doing next on one of his projects, or maybe we'll see something related to this in the DLC. Moving on. Something set Sulyvahn down this path. When Sulyvahn was a young sorcerer, he discovered the profaned capital, and down there he discovered an unfading flame below a distant tundra of Irithyll, and when he found this, a burning ambition took root within him. The profaned flame. The origins of it aren't known, but we do know a few things. We know it's an unfading flame, we know that it can be manipulated, and we know that it swallows the hearts of those who wield it. The Pontiff himself imbued his greatsword with this fire, and he also gave it to his holy knights. Shortly after he did this, the fire witches had their hearts swallowed by the flame. And as one last example of its corrupting influence, the handmaidens who wield it down in the profaned capital, their dagger says that they take pleasure in wounding others, and of course the Pontiff himself doesn't exactly have a very good moral compass. But apart from that, we know precious little about the profaned flame, and this has been the hardest part of the script to write for me, because the profaned flame defies all categorization as flames that have existed previously in the series. So I'm going to work on my theories on it, and while I'm doing that I'll list those theories in the description, because I could talk about this thing for a very long time without actually getting anywhere. But the final thing, and maybe the most important thing we know about the profaned flame, is that Yhorm the Giant became a Lord of Cinder to put it to rest. Now, clearly, Yhorm was not successful, because the profaned flame has infiltrated almost all of Irithyll and set a lot of events in motion. This just adds even more tragedy to Yhorm's tale. Yhorm is the descendant of an ancient conqueror, and was asked by the very people once subjugated to lead them, serving as both a weighty blade and a stone-hard shield. Yhorm fought unflinchingly as a one-man vanguard, but one day he lost the one he wished to protect. In response, he threw down his great shield and added a left-handed notch to his machete instead, so he could two-hand it, for he no longer had anything left to protect. All the while, his human...
Sorry, are they talking about the Onion Man in this situation? The one he lost? Because I remember when we walked in with the Onion Man, obviously he was very infatuated by Yhorm, and like he mentions like old friend and stuff. But it does sound like the person he lost maybe died. The Onion Man didn't die. So I don't know if that's who they're referring to, but I'm sure we'll maybe find out.
Human subjects appeared quite disrespectful of him. They were insincere when they called him a lord, and they doubted him. He is called Lonely Yhorm in his cinders, and perhaps that's because he lost the one he wished to protect, or perhaps because he didn't have the love of his people. At some
Damn.
point, the profaned flame became a real problem in the capital, for according to his cinders, Yhorm decided to sacrifice himself and become a Lord of Cinder to put the profaned flame to rest. I don't know why Yhorm decided that, hey, I'm going to put out fire with fire, because when he did this, fire rained down from the sky and
Damn.
incinerated naught but human flesh. This is an interesting insight into who the linking of the fire consumes.
Damn. Dude, I didn't even notice all these bodies. That's crazy. Damn.
It consumed humans and humans alone, and you see their disfigured, smelted corpses all around Yhorm's chamber. Before he linked the fire, however, Yhorm left behind 2 storm rulers, which was a legendary greatsword, also known as the Giantslayer, for the residual strength of storm that brings giants to their knees. So this thing could kill giants, and one he gave to the humans who doubted him. He called them out on their cowardly words and gave them a weapon capable of killing
That's
him.
hard.
And the other storm ruler he gave to a dear friend in return for a promise.
Right.
This dear friend was Sigurd, who journeys to the profaned capital in order to uphold his promise and slay his old friend. Presumably, Yhorm asked Sigurd to kill him if he ever betrayed his duty, and Sigurd does so, seeing that Yhorm has not returned to link the fire once again.
Wow.
The profaned capital also had its sorcerers, who claimed heirship to the legacy of the renowned scholar Big Hat Logan, even going so far as to emulate the type of staff he used. But halfway across the world, I know of 2 crystal sages who emulated him even more closely. These crystal sages served as spiritual guides to the scholars of Lothric's grand archives, and one of them went on to ally with the Undead Legion. The Undead Legion of Farron was a caravan of undead, dedicated to the eradication of the Abyss wherever it was found. The Abyss Watchers, as they were called, follow the duty and the form of the Wolf Knight of Dark Souls 1, known as Artorias the Abyss Walker. They are essentially his legacy.
Oh, that's
They
so
made
cool,
their home
dude.
in Farron Keep, and high above Farron Keep lies an emaciated old wolf. The Abyss Watchers, for their hunting of the Abyss, they required some art that went beyond any existing art. Wolf's Blood, the legacy of Artorias, provided just that.
Wow.
Their pointed steel helm became shirked as this sinister omen by the masses, because, think about it, if you saw that pointed steel helmet coming towards your kingdom, you knew you were in trouble, because these guys are dedicated to taking out the Abyss. And indeed, their home in Farron might just be set above such a kingdom, for below are the catacombs of Karthus, and sealed within a goblet, deep below in the catacombs, is the encounter with High Lord Wolnir, a ruler who succumbed
Jump
to the
scare
Abyss.
boss.
Before succumbing to the Abyss, Wolnir was a conqueror. He ruled over the people of Karthus of the Sands, formidable warriors who were masters of the curved sword, and also of pyromancies that enhanced the effectiveness of their curved swords. The swordsmen attached great value to victory at all costs, for where was the honor in death? They lived for their High Lord Wolnir, who was conqueror of most lands known to their people, and yeah, you can see why they loved him.
Yeah.
In Wolnir's time, there were other lords who had their crowns rightfully bequeathed upon them, but Wolnir brought them to their knees and ground their crowns to dust, forming his own crown from theirs.
Damn.
For he was the one High Lord, keen to outlive all others. Reminds me a lot of what we did in Dark Souls 2. Anyway, somehow, Wolnir himself fell to the Abyss, and he was gripped by this fear of true darkness, and he pleaded to the gods for the first time.
Yep.
In our boss fight with him, there is a darkness below Wolnir,
Yep.
and it's struggling to consume him. But Wolnir had his holy sword, and he had 3 armlets which he had stripped from the corpses of clerics, and these things gave him some semblance of comfort. Of course, we destroy the bracelets, and the Abyss finally consumes him.
God,
While he was in the
I remember when we fought Wolnir, and we killed him, and you could just see him being dragged back, and like I felt so bad for him for some reason. Like he just looked so hopeless, man. And then eventually we read his weapon description and his soul description, and that's kind of what I put together. That it looked like he was just being consumed by the abyss, and the braces was the only thing keeping him kind of what Vaati just said, just keeping him kind of confident that he wasn't gonna get sucked back, made him feel comfortable. And the fact that we just walked in there and got rid of that, like imagine the. I mean, I don't know if he had emotions. I'm sure he did, but imagine like the fear when the braces started to break. It just that's really what, like, the boss fight itself was a little bit underwhelming. At least for me, like I picked up right away that we obviously had to hit the shiny objects, and it was kind of on the easier side. But everything around it, the arena, the way he just jumps into the screen, the lore now, it makes him a really, really cool boss overall, and so dark. So dark.
Abyss, however, Wolnir was not inactive. Black Serpent is this pyromancy that was discovered from the Abyss by Wolnir, which went on to inspire the black arts of his Grave Wardens. The Grave Warden pyromancy tome was developed by his Grave Wardens who discovered his pyromancies. And going back up for a second, Wolnir and the Abyss, their proximity to the Abyss Watchers probably isn't coincidence.
Right.
In fact, it makes quite a lot of sense for Karthus to be one of the kingdoms that the Abyss Watchers toppled. So let's go back up to the Abyss Watchers for a second and see if this theory holds any weight. Eventually, the Abyss Watchers became Lords of Cinder. Their shared wolf's blood served their mandate as lords. Essentially, it met the requirements. To gain access to the Abyss Watchers, you have to extinguish 3 flames, and I always wondered why this ritual existed.
Yeah.
It felt very video gamey and out of
did.
place, but
I liked it,
I went
but it
through
did.
once more recently, and I looked really closely at the engravings behind each flame. One looks like the 4 kings, one looks like
shit.
Nito, and one looks like the Bed of Chaos, 3 of the main lords in Dark Souls 1, and these were the souls you had to collect to gain access to Gwyn and open a giant stone door. So these are likely here to symbolize that, right? We're extinguishing
cool.
3 flames and we're opening the door that explains the ritual. Anyway, that's more a piece of trivia than anything.
I like it.
After the Legion's Watchers became Lords of Cinder, the wolf blood dried up, and Farron was consumed by a festering wood. Dark wraiths began to roam, the keep fell to ruins, and, as suggested by many of you in my lore through, the Abyss Watchers, upon being resurrected to link the fire once more, may have been affected by the Abyss as well. So here's the theory. The Abyss Watchers were driven to seek out the Abyss, right? Well, what if, upon their resurrection, the Abyss far below in the catacombs of Karthus crept into the Abyss Watchers themselves? This would explain why the Abyss Watchers are locked into endless combat with themselves, because they're driven to seek out the Abyss, but they also can't die, so they're locked into endless combat. When I read this theory in the comments, something else clicked as well. The Wolf Knight armor, which belonged to Artorias, who fell to the Abyss, says that the armor of the Abyss Watchers suggests their own eventual end. So the game is drawing a parallel here between Artorias and the Abyss Watchers. It's saying that the armor of the Abyss Watchers shows that they're falling to the Abyss as well. And here's the really interesting thing. When you look closely at their armor, you
the
realize
cape.
it has black tendrils of the
that's
Abyss
so cool,
rising
dude.
up. So the armor
Holy
is showing us
shit.
that they fell to the Abyss.
Wow.
Probably. This theory isn't concrete, and no one should take it as such.
I'll take it.
But I think
I love
it's the
that.
best explanation for their infighting. It's my
Yeah.
favorite explanation, anyway.
I never
And
noticed that. I thought it
mostly
was just getting
this one
burnt.
was all you guys, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Onwards to Lothric. The Knights of Lothric were hunters of dragons, explaining their affinity with lightning and why they worshipped the sun. They have since tamed dragons, and with their drakes, they once crushed anything that threatened their shores. The knight has served as one of the 3 pillars of Lothric since ancient times, and it shares place alongside the wyverns as a symbol of Lothric.
Right.
However, tales of Dragonslayers are now a rare thing, and they're told only in fragments and whispers in remote regions. The Dragonslayer armor lost its master long ago, but it still remembers the sporting hunts they shared together. When we fight against it, the armor retains its master's fighting style, but now it has a new master, the Pilgrim Butterfly.
Ah,
Now,
so there were
the soul of-
butterflies. Interesting. I was very confused as to what these things were. But nice. Butterflies. I also got to say, the Dragonslayer armor was by far one of my favorite bosses in the main game. I don't know what it was, man. The music, we actually got to dance with it, which if you guys saw my playthrough, you guys know that I love dancing with bosses, and it was so good. It was so good. And it was so intense too. You know, the little butterflies kind of shooting at you towards the end of the second phase or into the second phase. But nice. It's good to know that these are supposed to be butterflies. I can definitely see the
Dragonslayer armor is the only mention of these butterfly creatures. So speculation abounds whenever you talk about them. When you look up at them closely, though, closer than the game intends you to ever get, you'll see that they're flesh and bone, and they're almost bent backwards with a ribcage jutting outwards. Now, their name is one of the biggest clues that we have, and the word pilgrim makes me think of the pilgrims of Londor, who all died on their way to the peak of Lothric. And just like these pilgrim butterflies fly upwards to the peak of Lothric as well. And in both these cases, with the pilgrims and the pilgrim butterflies, we have no real idea why either of them are going up. So perhaps we'll learn more if we ever get Londor-themed DLC, and I think that's pretty likely. I'm going to list 2 other theories in the description about the butterflies, because the bottom line is we don't know what they are. Next is the archives, and beyond the archives is Prince Lothric and his brother, Lorien.
Oh, I want to hear about
Curiously,
this.
these are the only Lords of Cinder who were not featured in the opening cutscene.
That's right.
With Lords being resurrected, and I believe that's because they never linked the fire. And I think their rejection of linking the fire might have been what set all of the desperate resurrections into motion. This is just a theory, but I think it's backed up by most of these descriptions and this dialogue.
Prince Lothric is in your hands. Please save his soul. Tell him what he must be, a lord.
So
Lord
there's
of
Prince
Cinder.
Lothric and Lorien, his brother. Lorien is the eldest, and before he was crippled, he was a knight who single-handedly slayed a demon prince, the victory eternally scorching his sword with flame.
Wow.
The Cinders of a Lord state that the Lothric bloodline was obsessed with creating a worthy heir.
Yep.
They needed someone to link the flame, and for some reason Prince Lorien did not suffice. So they put their faith in their next born, Prince Lothric, as his throne states, last hope of his line.
Wow.
Prince Lothric, destined to be a Lord of Cinder, was born into swaddling clothes used in ancient prayer, and they are all that he has ever worn. He was cherished by the royal family, despite being born into illness, a frail and shriveled child. He was their last hope, and meant to be a champion, but some things will remain distant dreams forever. Linking the fire proved impossible, so the family resorted to unspeakable means. Descriptions don't say or imply what these unspeakable means are, so that's up to us to guess at. But after mentioning these unspeakable means, the Cinder description goes on to say that the path to linking the fire is a cursed one indeed. So Prince Lothric was cursed. With what, we don't know, but Lorien embraced his brother's curse, leaving him mute and crippled. It is said that Lorien, the one who embraced the curse, did so willingly and embraced his fate. When we kill Lorien in the boss fight, Lothric resurrects him, saying, "For that is our curse." So maybe being unable to die itself is the fire-linking curse, and why he says,
You remain among the accursed.
Fuck.
After becoming one, the soul of the twin princes says that they rejected their duty to become Lords of Cinder and settled down far, far away to watch the fire fade from a distance. The curse has made their souls nearly inseparable. So why did Lothric grow to despise and reject his duty as a Lord of Cinder? Well, it's very likely due to a man named as the First of the Scholars. Soulstream says that he was alleged to be a private mentor of the royal prince, and that he doubted the linking of the fire. So it's very likely that this scholar was the one who made Lothric reject his fate as a Lord of Cinder. And there is so much more to the tale of Lothric.
That's so fucking cool,
we don't
dude.
have time. I want to talk about the kingdom, about the royal family, but this video is only about the main bosses.
That might be one of my favorite
kind
of background stories.
Osiris, King of
Osiris,
Lothric, and
nice.
his wife, the Queen. So please subscribe and look out for the optional bosses lore video.
Yeah, subscribe, guys.
And the final main boss,
And
the
Vaati.
being we fight after the Firekeeper chastises the lords for going without thrones, is the soul of Cinder
That
itself,
music, dude.
located within the kiln of the first flame. The soul of Cinder is actually a fairly easy being to explain. Ever since Lord Gwyn, the first Lord of Cinder, many exalted lords have linked the first flame,
Right.
and it is their very souls that have manifested themselves as defender of the flame. The soul of Cinder is their deific manifestation. More specifically, it's clear that the soul of Cinder is this conglomerate of players themselves, us from previous games and cycles, who have linked the fire. Using the ninja flip ring from Dark Souls 1, curved swords, pyromancies, sorceries, miracles, and in Phase 2, the music shifts to this twisted tribute of Gwyn's theme as he
So
takes on
good.
the First Lord's fighting style. The kiln also...
Guys, I think that is why he absolutely destroyed me. And yes, that video, ended up being a little bit controversial. You guys gaslit me into thinking that he was going to be extremely easy. Went into it naked. You guys know the drill. It was actually a very, very funny episode. But dude, if you guys saw my Dark Souls 1 playthrough, I struggled so much with Gwyn, like so much. And obviously after we, I suck at remembering to parry. I'm not a big parry person, but once we finally got to that, it became a little bit easier. But there is something about Gwyn's moveset that has been just destroying me since day one. And when the Soul of Cinder started doing it, I genuinely got scared. When I heard the music, obviously it brought back, the DS1 days. And I actually remember talking kind of a bit of shit about the music during the Gwyn fight, the piano notes. I thought it was a little bit, I wasn't, in the moment, I was very upset with the run back, and I was so frustrated that he kept killing me so much. And the music, just hearing it over and over again and just having it as like a very sad song for the final boss kind of did something in me. But hearing it again in Dark Souls 3 at the end of it was like the most beautiful. Like, I literally got, if you watch the video back, like you can see when I get like chills on my neck. It was so impactful, and I love that they added that little bit for the final boss of the main game in Dark Souls 3. But the movesets, I suck at them. I suck at fighting Gwyn movesets, man. It does something to me. It's really fast, and my brain doesn't compute it properly. But one day I want to come back to all these games and master it. No hits, 0 hits. Anyways, I forget where I was going with all this. I think I covered what I wanted to say. Who knows, man? Let's finish this video.
It represents the state of the world if you look behind you. It's a city twisted and distorted and folded in on itself, just like the entire game and bosses we just journeyed through.
Yeah.
Dark Souls 3 contains the histories, the people, and the lands of the Abyss Watcher's age, of the Pontiff and Aldrich's age, of Yhorm's age, and the story of Lothric that literally seems to have called forth old lords of Cinder to link the fire once again.
Wow.
And as you stand in front of the flame, 4 choices lay before you.
Oh,
more
shit.
than any previous game. But that's a video and a story.
Aw, damn
for
it.
another time.
I haven't seen
For
the
this
other
video is
endings.
far
I would
too
love
long
to take a
already,
look.
And judging by my analytics for videos like this, only half of the people who started watching this video will still be watching now. So
I
to
feel
you
that.
guys, thank you for sticking it through.
Oh,
This
you
video
got it,
took
dude.
A really long time to make.
Appreciate you,
And
man.
the major shout out in this video has to go to a guy who runs a YouTube channel named AGR Cactus. He taught me how to use a lot of these camera tricks, and this
I
video would
wanna learn
not
how to
look
make
half
that.
as good if it wasn't for his guidance.
Also, this is
He
one of
has
the
this
endings that I
video
haven't seen.
called The Beauty of Lothric, which really shows off how beautiful this game is when you look at it.
What the fuck? Is this the Lord of Hollows ending? This is the one that I was going to do originally. And then if you watch the final episode of Dark Souls 3, like I went through this like weird mental thing where I just completely changed my mind. And I'm glad I did. I really, really love the ending that we did with the Firekeeper. I absolutely loved it. It almost actually made me cry when she asked us if we can still hear her voice. I thought that was so beautifully done. But this looks crazy. The sun is literally white now.
at it
I
from
hope it keeps
angles
going.
that the game developers didn't exactly expect us to look at it from. So do me a favor and check it out and subscribe to him. It's crazy. I've probably been talking for about half an hour now, and I haven't covered nearly as much as
Oh my
I
God,
would
it
have
is Lord of
liked
Hollows
to have
ending.
covered. So for that, we have the Lore Through series, which is dedicated to
That's so
being
cool.
really in-depth as we go through every single area in the game, and to bring out the characters and their stories and what their stories relate
Our
to.
gracious
we have
Lord.
Prepare to Cry.
Okay, hold on. We need to watch this. We need to watch this ending the proper way. Actually, you know what, guys? I'm gonna leave that for another video. It'll probably be a quick one, but I really want to react to all the endings explained. I'm seeing a video here by Mad Luigi. But man, this was again another VaatiVidya banger. I love that we got to learn about all of the main bosses. So far, I think the Twin Princess and obviously P. Sully's lore background is the one that kind of touches me the most. I think it's so incredibly cool. The whole thing about the curse and how they kind of refuse to link the fire. There's just a lot of really cool tidbits there, man. But overall, all these bosses, I mean, they've been so good. Dark Souls 3 is jam-packed with amazing bosses and music and movesets, and really feels like an amazing conclusion to the entire franchise. Again, shout out to VaatiVidya for creating such an amazing video. I know it came out 7 years ago. Most of you have probably already seen it, but I gotta show them some love. I get so excited when we get towards the end of these playthroughs, because I know that we're gonna dive into these Lore and Chill episodes and learn a lot. And it's been so amazing kind of sharing these experiences with you guys. And I know you guys really enjoy these videos, so we're gonna keep pumping them out. If there's anything that you would like to add down in the comments based on things that maybe Vaati has updated in other videos, or your own speculations, or something that maybe I interpreted wrong based on like a comment that I made today, just let me know down below. We are a community here of lovely people, and we kind of just entertain each other with our own theories and whatnot. Alrighty guys, I have to go somewhere, but now we're back. At first I was gonna make two videos, well, one with the main bosses, one with the optional bosses, but honestly I got back and I just want to watch this optional boss one, and it just makes sense to group them into one video. Make sure to leave a like if you haven't already, man. Really appreciate that. Alright, let's do it. I also love VaatiVidya, how he
Lord
makes
Gwyn's
these cinematic,
firstborn
just
son was a god of
just
war,
so good, man.
who inherited the sunlight from his father.
Nice.
The power of sunlight is manifest as lightning, and it's highly effective against dragons. And Gwyn's firstborn son was once a Dragonslayer who fought against his father's ancient enemy.
Wow.
And as you know, the ancient dragons once ruled over an age of grey, but Gwyn discovered their weakness and he struck them down with great bolts of lightning.
So badass.
Later, advancements in arms would lead to lightning-imbued spears with a cross pommel, which were developed to be stamped or thrust deep into the flesh of dragons. The firstborn's Dragonslayer sword spear was the first of such weapons, for the firstborn had respect only for arms and nothing else. At some point during the war, however, Gwyn's firstborn had a change of heart. He switched sides and sacrificed everything to ally himself with the ancient dragons.
That's crazy.
And unlike a lot of Souls lore, this part of history is actually described as missing for a reason. For after he sided with the ancient dragons, Lord Gwyn's firstborn was expunged from the annals of history, and his deific status was rescinded. He was no longer considered a god, no longer in the books of history, and today even his name is not known.
Wow.
If you played around the time that Dark Souls 1 was released, the identity of the Firstborn was a complete mystery to all of us.
Yep.
All we knew was that he was Gwyn's firstborn, that he was a god of war, and that he was a core part of the Warriors of Sunlight. So players puzzled over missing statues next to Gwyn, they puzzled over...
I remember when we played Dark Souls 1 that I thought the Sun Bro was the son of Gwyn, based on, you know, the whole Warriors of Sunlight situation, and obviously, a lot of you guys pointed out that, you know, some of his statues are even ruined in Dark Souls 1. Like, they're just missing or cut in half. And at the time of me playing it, I had no idea, as a lot of you guys probably felt the same way. And it's actually really cool how they thought about that since the very start. I think that's so awesome. And I love when, like, movies, video games, when they do that, you know, you can really see that they had a plan all along. And that's just great writing. That's really what it is.
Broken monuments to the Warriors of Sunlight, and we even guessed that the Firstborn himself could have just been a simple man from Astora who fought for the sun. And it is true that the god of war continued to watch over his sunlight warriors, but we can now finally see where he went and why.
Right.
The Nameless King, firstborn son of Gwyn, heir of sunlight and god of war, left the miracle sunlight blade upon his father's coffin, perhaps as a final farewell.
Wow.
Now, this part of the Nameless King's history, it's been purposefully erased, but some players do think that traces of his existence still remain out in the world and cannot be erased. In fact, it's a popular theory, and I'll leave a link to a few sources in the description, that the Nameless King is referenced in the Farron armor set,
No way.
which is this plate set that was named after a god of war. The mighty Lion Knights of Ferosa, worshippers of the war god Farron, wore heavy armor and were feared for their two-handed swordplay. This armor was blessed by the war god Farron. Ferosa would later fall to conflict with their neighbors, and the legacy of the Farron Knights fell with it, so the information here is also lacking. But is the Nameless King the war god Farron? Well, that's up to you to decide. Both are described as war gods, both place high value in arms. The Nameless King had to be king of some realm, and the Farron set is blessed and named after a god of war, who is possibly the one emblazoned upon the helm as a knight facing a dragon. Also,
No way,
both the Nameless King and the kingdom of Ferosa fell from power, so hey, whatever you
That's
believe,
so
this is
cool,
a classic
man.
example of Souls
That is
leaving
such a
just
small
enough clues
detail.
that you can choose to believe or not choose to believe, so no one is provably right or wrong here.
Damn.
But moving on to what we do know. The Nameless King tamed a storm drake, upon which he led a lifetime of battle. Assumedly, this partnership with the storm drake was a part of the firstborn allying with the ancient dragons. I have a few suspicions that the storm drake might also be known as a giant horned Oni, which are found in eastern lands, as the Oni Slayer Great Arrow describes.
Right.
And it's the only creature in the game that really fits the description of an Oni, whatever creature that is, and it's certainly a drake that looks very much like a foreign offshoot of most other draconid creatures in Souls. It looks nothing like them, really.
Yeah.
Oni are also found in an eastern land, and Ferosa is in an eastern land as well, so maybe there's something
like a
here,
crow.
but just speculation. When the storm drake fell, the king claimed its soul, as was customary in the Age of the Gods. In a giant flash, we see the Nameless King become imbued with the drake's power of the storm, which is really reminiscent of Ornstein and Smo, absorbing one another in their boss fight
That's
in Dark
so
Souls
cool.
1, as the Age of the Gods was drawing to a close there. Dark Souls 3's description of Smo's great hammer tells us that Smo was the last knight to remain at his post, guarding the ruined cathedral. Ornstein, on the other hand, he long guarded the ruined cathedral, but he left the land in search of the Nameless King.
Right.
So you're probably asking yourself, how did Ornstein leave the cathedral if I killed him in Dark Souls 1 and
I was
then
wondering
again
that,
in Dark
yeah.
Souls 2?
Yep.
Well, remember, Dark Souls 3 is the game that very openly references the fact that events are doomed to repeat themselves.
Yep.
More
Cycle.
than any previous game. This is a game about cycles,
Yep.
and the Lords of Cinder who contributed to their own cycle. We see so many cycles laid before us, so yes, a lot of narratives and plots in the game have been recycled. In a way, that's what the games are about.
Yeah.
But in Dark Souls 3, it's nice because a lot of these plots are further along than ever before. Take Ornstein, for example. In this timeline, he survived until he tired of standing around in a cathedral, and he left. For during this dragonless age where he stood in the cathedral, Ornstein the Dragonslayer must have felt quite bereft of purpose, so he left in search of the Nameless King. So the question becomes, did he intend to kill the Nameless King,
Right.
or did he intend to serve him? Ornstein's set in Dark Souls 1 describes Ornstein as the captain of the 4 knights of Lord Gwyn. But the Leo ring of Dark Souls 3 describes him as the first knight of the sun's eldest born, the Nameless King. So, since I find it hard to believe that he could be both the captain of the guard to Gwyn and simultaneously the first knight of the firstborn, I think it's most likely that Ornstein abandoned his duty as captain of the guard
then joined the Nameless King.
Then decided to serve the Nameless King instead, after he was exiled.
Right.
But the best evidence that Ornstein remained a friend to the Nameless King is the Sacred Oath description, which labels him as not just the Nameless King's first knight, but his faithful first knight. Since the game is clarifying something like this, then I'm going to believe that he is loyal to the Nameless King.
Yeah.
So Ornstein tracks down and pledges allegiance to the Nameless King. But what becomes of Ornstein after his arrival in Archdragon Peak? We find his armor and his weapon after the Nameless King fight, but it's just discarded to the side. It's not upon a corpse, it's not in a chest, and this is strange for Souls, right? It stands out. I don't think there's many examples of this happening. So sure, it wouldn't make sense for the armor to be upon a corpse, but items like this are at least meant to be in chests.
So he didn't die,
so
he just left
to me, it signifies that Ornstein didn't want to preserve anything at all from his past, or perhaps that he discarded his armor in the same way that many people here do to begin the transformation into a dragon.
Oh, what?
So, is Ornstein alive? Is he dead? Was he killed by the Nameless King, or did he become one of the dragons in the shrine? His fate is left open for you to decide. So we've mentioned the spell Sacred Oath before, and its description reads, Sacred Oath, a miracle devised by warriors of the sun, tells the tale of the sun's firstborn, his faithful first knight, and the brave Dragonslayer who served them both. The brave Dragonslayer who served them both. So a few Dragonslayers could fit this description, but I think it's most likely that this was Havel. Havel the Rock was a battlefield compatriot of Gwyn, the First Lord. He was suited in this armor carved from solid rock, and he wields the tooth of an everlasting dragon. Havel was followed by warriors who replicated his armaments and his weaponry and never flinched nor retreated from battle.
Man, can we just appreciate for a second the fact that Vaati, cosplays, well, maybe cosplay is not the right word, but he basically just for each individual character that he's trying to tell a story of, he completely, puts himself in the armor. He walks through the lands as if it was that character specifically. Like, the level of craft that this man puts into his videos is just so admirable and honestly inspiring. I really just want to throw that in there. I appreciate it, man. It's cool.
Havel was the arch enemy of Seath, the Scaleless, which was the dragon who betrayed his own and allied with Lord Gwyn. This must have placed Havel in an awkward spot. He's a battlefield compatriot of Lord Gwyn, and yet Gwyn allied with a magic-wielding, traitorous dragon that Havel hates. In Dark Souls 1, it's implied that Havel was locked away by a dear friend, and all that time ago, we theorized that it was Gwyn himself who locked his hollowed friend away. We also talked about how a piece of occult weaponry was capable of killing the gods, and it was locked away in a basement with the rest of Havel's gear. And this fueled some theory that Havel plotted against the gods.
Wow.
In Lordran, Havel remained locked in that basement, but in Dark Souls 3, perhaps we see a different path to Havel's tale. We find armaments left by Havel himself in Archdragon Peak, and we can easily theorize that Havel was the Dragonslayer mentioned in the tale of Sacred Oath. A brave Dragonslayer, the keyword being brave, who never flinched or retreated from battle, and had good cause to take up arms with the Nameless King, who was another leader positioned to rebel against Gwyn and Seath the Scaleless. Of course, to play devil's advocate, Havel could also be there to slay the Nameless King. He is overlooking the corpse of an ancient dragon, after all, but as a final piece of proof that he's on the Nameless King's side, the half-dragon summoners, the ones with the frilly necks that summon phantoms to fight against you, they summon warriors of Havel to fight. Also, I want to point out that they summon a half-naked dude wielding Ricard's rapier and wearing a crown, so I'm assuming this is Ricard as well. And it links Prince Ricard to a king, it links him to the Way of the Dragon, and it links him to yet another castle full of half-dragon snake creatures. So, that is pretty much everything surrounding the Nameless King explained. So what do you believe? The story is really open-ended, and I've given you most of the raw information you need to tell your own story. But regardless, now you know the story of Archdragon Peak, where the son of Gwyn switched sides, separated himself from the fire-linking fiasco, and assumedly quietly began rebuilding the ranks of the ancient dragons.
Damn.
So we just talked about how
cool,
Havel hated a dragon named Seath the Scaleless, a traitorous, mad pale drake whose twisted soul clearly lives on in Osiris, the consumed king. Osiris was once king of Lothric, married to a queen who was revered as a goddess of fertility and bounty, much like Guinevere from Dark Souls 1, and as we know from the previous video, the Lothric line was obsessed with creating a worthy heir and the right of the linking of the fire. Osiris, however, in his later years, became fascinated with dragons. His research led him to the heretics of the Grand Archives of Lothric, where he discovered the twisted worship of Seath the Pale Drake. Eventually, he discovered the research that was done by Big Hat Logan, who you'll remember from Dark Souls 1. He was this legendary scholar who went mad delving into Seath's sorceries. So Osiris was inspired, he was edified by Big Hat Logan, and he even learnt how to perform the crystal breath of Seath the Scaleless. He was transforming into this dragon, he was changing, and behind Osiris we see the rest of his chambers, and they're full of dragon scales and dead man serpents, and there's even a Drakeblood Knight in the Way of the Dragon pose. Osiris himself was clearly somewhat successful at turning into an ancient dragon, and given his admiration for Seath, it seems that he took on Seath's soul aspects. Osiris became this blind, mutated pale drake just like Seath, and he was obsessed with this notion that he could use his royal blood for a, and I quote, greater purpose.
Wow.
So he fathered this crossbreed child with his queen and named him Ocelot.
Which actually got taken out of the game. I watched a video of the original cut with the baby in his hands, and if you guys haven't seen that, I don't recommend it because it is quite disturbing, but there is a video on YouTube, and man, I can see why they got rid of it because it is gruesome. I wonder if Audie's gonna touch on that. That blew my mind, man.
After giving birth to Ocelot, her youngest child, the Queen of Lothric quietly disappeared. Let's talk about the Queen a little bit. This Queen either takes after Guinevere or is Guinevere, because in Dark Souls 1, Guinevere left the ailing land of Lordran in exactly the same manner that this Queen leaves the ailing land of Lothric. Also, Guinevere of Dark Souls 1 also pushes the chosen undead to link the fire, and in Dark Souls 3, the Queen of Lothric is obsessed with finding people to link the fire, even placing powerful rings in the untended graves in the hope that one day an unkindled would rise to link the fire. So the parallels between these two are undeniable. And with the flame fading in Dark Souls 3 and this pus of man spreading across the castle, the Grand Archives, where Osiris learnt all of his knowledge, closed its doors for good, and Osiris remained, walled off behind this garden, clutching his dragon crossbreed Ocelot. Many assassins were dispatched to his domain, but none returned. We learn that the consumed king ascribed his resilience to the divine protection of the dragon scale. And when we stumble through the consumed garden, we find this pale drake cradling his invisible infant crossbreed before the fight. He's a very vocal boss, which is rare. I think we need to just say,
I love when bosses like speak to you, like, or at least in the beginning, or you know, when you hit them a certain way. I feel like it makes bosses so epic, man. I wish more did that, in all honesty. But anyways,
every line of his dialogue.
you ignorant slaves.
Great voice, too.
Finally taken notice, have you? Of the power of my beloved Ocelot, child of dragons. Well, I will not give him up, for he is all that I have.
So first off, he calls us ignorant slaves. And I think this means that he's arrogant and he sees his subjects as slaves, or perhaps he's referring to us being slaves to the linking of the fire, which Lothric is known for.
Right.
Then he says, finally taken notice, have you? Which explains how he hasn't been disturbed for a very long time. He is out of the way, he's not a main boss, and he's also behind this fair line of defense and within a locked-off castle. We know it's been a long time because the main boss we fight in this area also gives us that impression. Osiris believes that this crossbreed child named Ocelot is worth taking notice of, but is he, really? Ocelot is the crying baby in the boss fight, and if we could see it, we would probably see that it's a crossbreed between a dragon and the royal bloodline. And crossbreeds of this type have existed in the past. 3 others we know of are the Emerald Herald, Yorshka, locked up in the tower, and most notably Priscilla from Dark Souls 1. All that time ago in Dark Souls 1, we theorized that Priscilla was a crossbreed between a lord and a dragon. Specifically, a lot of people said that she was the offspring of Seath the Scaleless and Guinevere, and that parentage is really strongly mirrored here between Osiris and his queen, who's basically Guinevere. And maybe I should have mentioned this earlier, but Priscilla also had the ability to turn invisible, which explains why Ocelot, the baby he appears to be cradling, cannot be seen. And if Osiris is blind, like Seath was, then perhaps he's not even aware that his child is invisible. Priscilla also had this ability called Life Hunt, which apparently the gods feared. Presumably, Life Hunt, though it is never properly described, can harm the gods, and maybe the threat of this was what made the Queen of Lothric leave her home this time around. Because it is easy to believe that Osiris would turn against his own kingdom. After all, Seath's soul line, as I'm calling it, they've all been betrayers.
Yeah.
Seath betrayed the ancient dragons, the Duke of the Writhing Ruins in Dark Souls 2 set spiders upon the townsfolk, and I think it's most likely that Osiris hoped that this crossbreed child would be this powerful weapon with Life Hunt, based on how he talks about it during the fight. However, this crossbreed didn't turn out as Osiris hoped, clearly, and Osiris's plan, maybe not such a great one. He is always referenced as deluded and mad.
Dear little Ocelot,
Just smashes him.
where have you gone? Are you hiding from me? Come out. Come out.
Isn't he supposed to still be in his hands right
You
now?
were born a child of dragons. What could you
He's just
possibly
delusional, I guess.
fear? Now, show yourself.
Or he's turned
Ocelot.
invisible. He's a crossbreed.
My dear little Ocelot.
Originally, Osiris resembles a father fighting to protect his child, but as he nears death, he seems to become increasingly frustrated with his crossbreed's lack of power.
Oh,
He appears even to smash this baby he was cradling upon the ground, and he reverts to a more feral stage
That's Dark
as he
Souls.
fights for his life against us. The baby, however, it continues to cry even after this, so yeah, maybe it's still alive.
oh shit.
So, what are the consequences of Osiris's treachery? Well, the collapse of his rule was probably this fair part of the collapse of the castle, and even of Lothric Kingdom. Plus, the passive man is concentrated a lot in his garden, but apart from that, like the Nameless King, I can't see that his decisions had this huge impact upon the world. In the previous video, we talked about how the Lothric bloodline resorted to unspeakable means to find a worthy heir to link the fire. And my last thoughts on this boss are that perhaps Ocelot was created with similar intent to Shanalot, the dragon crossbreed of Dark Souls 2 that men hoped would ward off the fire-linking curse.
Right.
What's unclear is whether Osiris also fathered Lorien and Lothric, who are the two children of the royal bloodline who refused to link the fire. Lorien, the eldest, he was raised as a knight, and before his brother's curse crippled him, he was famed for single-handedly slaying the demon prince, leaving his sword eternally scorched with fire. I'd wager that this demon prince is probably related to the old demon king, if only because they're the only hints of demon royalty that we've ever seen in the game. And if these two are related, then maybe the arena that you fight the old demon king in is also related. There are piles of dead demon kin corpses, which signifies that some battle took place here.
True.
And of all these demons, the shriveled old demon king is the only one to remain. Now, like a clump of burnt ash, he's the last living witness of the chaos
That
of
sucks.
Izalith. The Chaos Flame of Izalith was born when the Witch of Izalith attempted to use her own soul to create another First Flame. Instead, she turned into this tumultuous bed of chaos which birthed demons
Best boss
from
in
the
Dark Souls
fire,
1.
beings that bore the smouldering essence of the Chaos Flame and were doomed eventually to perish. The Old King's hammer has survived since Old Izalith and is imbued with remnants of the Chaos Flame. We've talked about the Chaos Flame so much over the years, and in Dark Souls 3 we definitely see when it and demonkind are at their lowest point. Stray demons, Capra demons, Taurus demons, and even hidden centipede
They
demons.
really had all the
They're
demons
dead
in there.
in this arena, and
I noticed
one
a few,
stray
but not all
demon
of
we
them.
do face out in the world even lacks a trace of flame, showing how core this flame is to their survival.
Wow.
So the demon race and the Chaos Flame, it's demonstrably at its lowest point in the series. All of this said, demons are a largely undeveloped part of the lore, and I really do wish that they were designed to be more than just brutish enemies, you know? With the old demon king though, I liked it at the end of the fight. You might not have noticed, but if you keep him alive at around 10% health, he, in
So that
this
was
desperate
intentional.
attempt to fend us off with one final effort,
Right, and
he
then he goes
releases
down.
all of his remaining energy. He fails, and then he stays
That's
panting on
crazy.
the ground indefinitely, unable even to lift his great hammer.
Oh, I wish I didn't kill him so
surrounded
fast
by the
when he
corpses of his
started doing
kind,
this.
and he's the last piece of his race, just reduced to flimsily batting us away with one hand. That kind of scene where there's no cutscene, there's no break in the gameplay, and it still shows, you know, an emotion, a feeling that it wants to convey. That's good game design. And I feel like it's lost on a lot of people.
And the
because
flame disappears.
Most people will just finish this guy off in that last 10% of his
Yeah.
health, but it's a powerful scene.
That's so
And
cool.
finally, the curse-rotted Greatwood, rooted in
tree
the Undead
balls.
settlement. The Undead settlement is a home to many undead.
I love
and
this
it's
place
full of
so
workers
much.
who are dedicated to the dissection and the burial of themselves. Because it makes sense that in this village and refuge full to the brim with undead, that the primary task would end up being, you know, what do we do with all the bodies that keep rising from the grave? There's just this sheer problem of overpopulation, which could never be properly reduced because they never die. And as a result, in this place, you find undead caged together, dissected, hung, and buried, but probably just rising from the dead all the same to begin the process over again. Eventually, teachers from the Cathedral of the Deep came to take advantage of this climate in the undead settlement. The evangelists, all women, came to enlighten inhabitants of the undead settlement and sent carriers
God,
on the
was she
path
laughing?
to sacrifice, most likely to the Cathedral
crazy.
of the Deep, where they would be consumed by Aldrich as a sacrifice.
Wow.
So, given this, it's no surprise really that all manner of curses managed to seep into the undead settlement, for undead were being dissected, their bones were being ground to dust, and they were buried within the earth. Rooted within that same soil, that same earth, was a spirit tree that would become known as the curse-rotted Greatwood. Spirit trees are another really undeveloped part of Souls lore, and they appear mostly in item descriptions from Dark Souls 2.
Right.
It's really easy to skip any description of a spirit tree. So let's talk about what we know. They're described as magical, sentient, and supposedly possessing divine powers. 2 descriptions in particular reference them as appearing in a dream world related to Quella, who is the goddess of dream. There was this one talking spirit tree that also turned itself into a shield to protect a small, frightened child.
Oh shit.
I also have a hunch that this green tree that repairs items in Dark Souls 2 in the Sunken Kingdom, I think it could be another type
Why did I
of
never
spirit
see
tree
this?
as well. But again, this is just an educated guess. There's not much we know about these creatures. At any rate, the worst of the curses in the Undead settlement were sealed away inside this spirit tree. Maybe it happened naturally, or maybe the townsfolk hoped that the tree would purify said curses, but eventually, however, the curses took their toll and festered in the belly of the Greatwood.
Ugh.
So let's talk about what we find in the belly of the Greatwood. One thing we find is the transposing kiln, which is this artifact from Coreland stitched with crystal lizard hide.
Before I was a Lord of Cinder, I was a student of transposition, the process of extracting and coalescing the essence of a soul. A forbidden art that once left a foul stain upon Coreland's honor. 'Tis an art that grants powers once thought unattainable. Most transposing kilns were lost with Coreland, but this place is a crossing for all manner of cursed objects.
Unwanted, cursed items were what was sealed within the Greatwood, so it makes a degree of sense that the forbidden transposing kiln would also be sealed within it at some point. And with Ludleth's help, this kiln allows souls to be turned into a form we can use, like a weapon or a ring. These items reflect the souls that they were transposed from, and give us more insight into that being. Ludleth himself, for example, drops the skull ring, which was a wonder transposed from the soul of a soul feeder, a beast that insatiably absorbed souls to feed its own power. So when we transpose the curse-rotted Greatwood soul, we aren't getting items related to the Greatwood, we're kind of getting items that were related to the curses that were within the Greatwood.
Shit.
For example, one is the Spear of Arstor, who was this knight from Karim, fond of impaling his enemies, and he was credited with the dreadful creation of the Bite set of rings. This is one thing we get from within the Greatwood. Another is the Hollow Slayer Greatsword, which harbours the fears that lurk within the minds of Hollows, and is more effective at killing them. So this sword, it's fairly well known in Souls. It once belonged to Lucatiel of Dark Souls 2, and you might be able to see why the Hollows of the Undead settlement would seal this sword away. It was known for killing their kind, and that's one hell of a curse to them. Let's talk about some comments from the previous video.
Damn, that one went by so fast, dude. That one was so good. Oh, I love that, man. Kind of wish that he touched a little bit more on the whole baby situation with Osiris when it comes to FromSoft kind of deciding to get rid of it. But it also makes sense that it'd be invisible because it's a crossbreed. Osiris's obsession with Seath is also very interesting to me. And he also mentioned that the Emerald Herald was also a crossbreed. And I don't know if I completely missed something in Dark Souls 2, but she looked very much just like a human. So I never thought of her as a crossbreed. The other ones are very obvious. They have, you know, they look like they have animal tails with humanoid features. So yeah, I don't really know where the Emerald Herald one came from, but the Nameless King story is incredible. I mean, it goes all the way back to Dark Souls 1. It kind of connects through all 3 of the Dark Souls games, which is awesome. I love how it also adds so much to Ornstein's story. The fact that he would kind of betray Lord Gwyn to go and join the Nameless King, which I do believe in that. I know he said that it's kind of up to anyone to interpret, but that's kind of how I would like to see it as well. And eventually he just kind of drops everything and leaves to kind of, you know, leave his past behind, maybe out of shame or whatever it is. Kind of cool how all these people that used to work for Gwyn all of a sudden wanted to kind of go against him and join his firstborn. I find that really, really cool. I think you could make a really sick movie just out of like the Nameless King's story. I thought it was amazing. The boss itself is incredible, and yeah, one of my favorites for sure, man. As for the old Demon King, I mean, that last bit of the fight, I was very confused when we first fought him. I thought the game was glitching, so I just kind of ran in for the kill, but I did notice that he was just kind of like shut down, and it makes sense. He was old, he was kind of, you know, giving up, he was kind of on his last straw, and the fact that he was just kind of swinging his arm like from time to time to kind of defend himself, even though he probably knew that he was about to you know, be gone forever, is really, really cool. Also kind of sad, but I mean, he is a demon at the end of the day. I don't think anyone likes demons. And as for the curse rotted Greatwood, I mean, one of my least favorite bosses in the game, without a doubt in my mind, but I guess it's really cool, kind of, you know, the fact that he was consuming all these curses and, you know, consuming all these, you know, souls and people, basically. I think that's really cool as well. And with all that, guys, that'll conclude the lore of the main bosses and the optional bosses. I'm gonna collect this into one episode. At first I was gonna do it separately, but I think it makes more sense to do it together. It was amazing to learn about these bosses. I hope that you enjoyed this, whether it was your first time watching this or your second, third, whatever. We will continue more lore and chill episodes throughout the week. We have the Prepared to Cry series, which we love here on the channel, and I believe there are some related to the DLCs, which I'm really interested to hear about. So make sure to stay tuned for that. Leave a like if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you haven't already. Very close to 20,000 subscribers, and yeah, hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one, man. Peace.